Okay, this is our 6th session on immortality, and it's the last one before we will do the simulated death experience next time. Discuss today how we can cope more easily with the death of loved ones. Now, we already have mentioned that the death of a loved one is the most painful experience that a human being can go through. And the worst of that is losing a child. But in my 30 some odd years of experience, I see that people react quite differently to such events. I know, for example, one mother who had a firm belief in these spiritual truths and was able to handle the death of her adolescent son so that within weeks she was fine. Whereas I have met other people who, after 15 years, have still not overcome. So there seem to be some factors which govern how well we cope with the death of a loved one. And I'd like to discuss those today, and of course with the idea of how can we cope more easily. First of all, I remind you of the fact that you have in your packet of papers a questionnaire which has some questions, which says, how will you cope with the departure of your loved ones? How do you imagine you will feel in the case of the departure of any of your close loved ones from their temporary physical bodies? 2. Do you feel fear concerning this possibility? If yes, what do you fear the most concerning your loved one's departure from their temporary physical bodies? 3. Which truths or beliefs would you like to strengthen in order to be able to accept more peacefully the inevitable and totally natural fact that we are all temporary and that either you or your loved ones will be departing from your bodies before the other? And 4. What would you like to do or complete in relationship with your loved ones so as to be more ready for their departure from their temporary physical bodies? Next week, before you leave your physical body, I'm going to ask you to write a letter to your loved ones. I'm going to ask you to imagine that you're about to die in 20 minutes. And that you have 20 minutes to write to your loved ones. So think about this week. What do you want to tell them? The idea that I'm going to leave my physical body or that they're going to leave their physical body makes a lot of the things that we argue about very silly. It makes a lot of things go into perspective, and it allows our love to come much more up to the surface and allows us to be much more truthful when we think of the fact that any of these beings that I love could leave at any time, and I also could leave at any time. So it's best to keep relationships clear. No ekremotitis, no pending matters in our relationships. Now, I'd like to go through a list of beliefs concerning the departure of loved ones with you, and then a list of positive beliefs. So these are the negative beliefs. First of all, I cannot live without him or her. Now, this is obviously not true. Except for our parents, there is no other being that we were always with from the beginning of our lives. I mean, there was a time when I existed without my child. There was a time in which I existed without my spouse, and also without some brothers and sisters, perhaps. So the idea that I cannot live, that I have no life, is a false belief. It's understandable that I suffer, but it's a total misconception that I cannot continue my life and continue to be happy. Secondly, I am not secure without him or her. So we have placed our feeling of security on this other person. And the loss of this person becomes, we become more vulnerable and we feel that we're not secure. Okay? So what we need to do in this case is to place our security either on ourselves or on a relationship with God. We cannot allow our security to be dependent on the existence of another particular human being. 3, no one else can give me joy or security. Now, I'm sure that many people feel this when they lose a loved one, but as the years pass, 4 years, 5 years, suddenly I realize that other people can also give me joy. So if I can do it in 5 years, why not do it in 1 month? One belief is, except for my own suffering, that this would be not being true to my loved one. That if I was true to my loved one, I would never love anybody else. I would never let anyone else make me happy. It's like I'm cheating, you see. But this is not true. This is definitely not true for the soul who has left the body. And this focusing on one being can definitely be an obstacle towards living our lives. My life had no meaning, has no meaning without him or her. So what are we talking about? Security, joy, meaning. These are things, very important needs that we get from our relationships. And when the specific being who gives us these, joy, security, or affirmation, or meaning, leaves the physical body, then we feel a tremendous loss. And the belief here is that I cannot find these within myself, security within myself, joy within myself, or meaning within myself, or I cannot find them in my relationship to God, or in my relationship with humanity, or in my relationship with another individual. There are so many possibilities. I can recreate meaning, joy, and security either with another individual, or with God, or with a group of people, or within myself. And so the pain of the loss of a loved one is much greater when I am dependent. So it's not only that I'm losing a loved one, I'm losing a source of meaning, a source of joy, a source of self-worth, a source of pleasure, and a source of security. Another belief, death is bad. It's a bad and painful experience. We have learned through this seminar that it's the opposite. Okay? I don't have the right to be happy since my loved one has died. This is a very strong belief system. And I know I've talked to a number of women who, in this area of the world, wear black. And when I talk to them, whether they're wearing black because they really feel that they should be wearing black, or whether they're wearing black for the community, their answer often is for the community. I felt this conflict also, not about wearing black, but at my father's funeral, I had been missing from Lebanon for a year, and I saw a lot of people that I hadn't seen for a number of years, and I was very happy to see them. So here I was in the receiving line with the family, people coming to express their condolences, and I was just getting so excited and so happy about seeing some people I hadn't seen in such a long time, and people, don't laugh so much, don't be so happy. And it was these dual feelings. I was very sad about my father's death. It was a very painful experience, a very confusing experience. But on the other hand, I was so happy to see these people at the same time who I hadn't seen in a long time. And of course, I was at that time a mixture, because I had been on this path for about 5 years, or even more. And I had definitely the belief in me that this was the way it was supposed to happen. On the other hand, there was a part of me which was feeling that this was an injustice, and I had both parts. And one part I allowed to cry when I felt like crying, and the other part felt perfectly comfortable with being happy and expressing that happiness. So I think that we need to be comfortable with both. There are the two extremes here. There are some people that don't cry at all, and then after about 2 or 3 years it all comes up to the surface, or they get ill. And other people that cry continuously and have the belief that it's a sin to be happy. So we need to be free of both beliefs. We must be able to cry if we feel it, and not say, I must not cry. And this often usually happens to men, but also to women who don't want their children to see them crying, or even children sometimes who don't cry for some reason. So we must be free to cry and also free to laugh. Not be bound into either of these. Another one, I will betray my loved one if I love someone else as much as I loved him or her. Love can never be a betrayal. Love is love. I will betray my loved one if I find a different purpose and meaning in my life. I mean, if we had the opportunity to speak with our loved ones who are left, they would say, please, get on with your life. Love, create, find meaning. This is the purpose of your life. And if they didn't say so, it would be because they are still identified with the ego and still thinking selfishly. Theoretically, we should be able to do that even while we're in the physical body. Telling our children, get on with your life. You don't have to sit here and dote over me. Or even our loved ones. Get on with your life. 11. I have been treated unjustly. So here is a lack of faith in the divine law, that something unjust has happened. It's very natural. This is the way we're programmed. This is how we think. But if we have faith, we won't feel this way. We will feel that there is some reason. Now, we may not be able to see the reason or understand the reason, but we will have faith that there is a hidden reason as to why our loved one had to leave at this time. I am unlucky, a victim of fate. Now, the antidote to this belief is that I create my reality and that I have chosen, even before being born, to go through this loss of a loved one. That this is something that I have chosen to go through, and I have seen so many people awaken to spiritual life through the death of a loved one. It becomes a very powerful stimulus for investigating what is life, what is death, what is the purpose of life. Another belief, the other's death is a punishment for him or for me, that death is a punishment. And this is still based on the belief that death is bad, whereas we have realized that death is liberation to a great degree. God, I am a sinner, otherwise God would not have punished me in this manner. God does not love me since he allowed my loved one to die. Now this is something I have heard quite a number of times. Someone will come to me and say, I don't believe in God. And I say, well, why? Well, says, I prayed for my child or for my husband or wife to get well, and God didn't make them well, so he doesn't exist. This is like me saying to you, give me something, and if you don't give it to me, you don't exist. It has no logic. We ask for something from the divine because we want it, because it serves the purpose of our ego. Our ego wants this particular source of happiness, this particular source of meaning or security. If we have any faith at all, we will realize that divine knows better what is for our spiritual evolution. I'm not denying the pain of this experience. I have been through it, and I've seen so many people go through it, and I respect it, and I accept it, and I believe that we should all feel that pain and release it. But at some point, we have to go beyond it. Feel it, release it, and we have to go beyond it. And God does not exist because he didn't do us the favors we asked for. It's my fault he died. I could have done something more. I have heard this so many times. And when there is guilt, that if I went to this doctor, not to the other doctor, or if I did what the other doctor said and not what this doctor said, and if I had been there half an hour earlier, and if we didn't have this fight, he would never have gone out and drove the way he did. These kinds of, that I am responsible. I cannot believe this. A student took out a gun and shot my father to death, and I don't believe that that student is responsible for my father's death. I believe that my father chose to leave his physical body in that day, in that way. So I cannot believe in my life that anyone is ever responsible for someone else's death. I believe this is chosen by the soul. So how can I believe that if we had chosen another doctor or another method, that the person, this soul was destined to leave at this time in this way? This guilt does not allow us to overcome the pain of death. When guilt gets in there, it makes it very difficult. And this is especially so in the case of suicides. I mean, the parents automatically take on all the responsibility. It's a real hell, because you're saying, well, something I did wrong. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done that. He wouldn't have committed suicide. And this is hell. There can't be a hell worse than this. And we have to realize that we do not create. There are so many parents who have done so many evil things to their children, and their children have not committed suicide. And there are so many parents who have been very good parents, and their children have committed suicide. I'm not saying that we don't have a responsibility to our actions towards our loved ones, but we don't create the reality. Because children can respond in any way, to any situation. Guilt is a very big obstacle. Another one. I did not have the chance to correct my relationship to him or her. I have guilt towards him, or I was not entirely correct towards him. So if we had a problem in the relationship, I had this with my father. I had begun to correct my relationship with him, but I hadn't brought the relationship to the state I would like to have it be before he left. And so I had to work with this after he died. And in a meditation, I think it was the second or third day, I brought him to my mind and I said, I forgive you for all of this, and I ask your forgiveness for all of what I have done. And I felt very clear after that. So the working on the forgiveness can be done also after the departure. We can either write, or we can even do it mentally or even verbally, ask for forgiveness and give forgiveness even after the soul leaves the body. Another belief, he deserted me, he left me here. Children often have this. Some children cannot realize that the parents don't have a choice to die or not. I remember one specific woman, a German woman, who her father died when she was about 8, took it as an abandonment, and that he didn't love her enough to stay. And she grew up then with the belief that all men will abandon her and that she's not worthy of love. And so this is a misconception. I'm conceiving that I am not worthy for this person to stay in life. So this is a desertion, an abandonment. And another belief, society and my acquaintances will not want me since my loved one has died. This is especially true when a woman loses her husband, because she is programmed to believe that society will accept her and the other couples will accept her if she has a husband to go along. And also, because we don't feel very comfortable with people's unhappy feelings, usually after a few months, people tend to avoid us. In which really there is a loneliness which sets in. See, what happens is the real pain of death doesn't come until after a few months, because in the beginning you have so many legal matters to take care of, so many practical, economic matters to take care of. You have people coming and visiting all the time to pay their condolences. And then after a few months all the paperwork is finished, The people have paid their condolences, and there's this silence. And in this silence, I really begin to feel the pain of the situation. In the beginning, there's a lot of activity. We don't feel as much. And it is true that some people withdraw their friendship, not because they don't love us, but because they don't feel comfortable enough with our negative feeling. And if we are always, every time they come over, crying and being negative, and they don't know how to handle this kind of situation, they gradually withdraw. And so this is also a problem which is created. Now, what are some of the emotions which we feel if we have the above-mentioned beliefs? First of all, fear that I will not be able to continue by myself. Secondly, injustice, that life or God took my loved one. Thirdly, depression, that my life no longer has any meaning. This is why I usually try to direct such people towards some type of meaningful activity, which for me falls into three categories. One is spiritual growth, it is working on our own self-knowledge. Second is creativity, any form of creativity, writing, painting, dancing, theater. And thirdly, service to society. Now, of course, if they have economic needs, another meaningful activity will be working for money. So there are these four possibilities in the beginning. 4, guilt, that I did not express my love or other positive feelings enough to my loved one before he or she left. With guilt that I did not express my love, or that I did something evil to the other person. 5, guilt that I should have done more to keep him or her alive, or should have been there when he or she left the body. I have heard people also say this, I should have been there. I left, and then 15 minutes later he left. You think that's by chance? He couldn't leave while I was there. This is very important to understand. But often our loved ones cannot leave when we, to whom they are most attached, are there. It's easier for them to leave when no one is there, or when someone more indifferent is there, less attached. Disappointment with myself for various reasons. Disillusionment with life and God. Sorrow and pain that I am not receiving the support and understanding which I need from others now in my difficult times. I have heard this quite frequently. Now that I am having difficult times, everyone has deserted me. And as I mentioned earlier, it happens. So we should be especially sensitive to this and care for these people. Give attention to them. Bitterness towards life and God. Loneliness and alienation from others who do not feel my pain. This is why we have groups here once a month for people who have lost loved ones recently, because when you're with someone else who has also lost a loved one, you feel a certain affinity, a certain understanding. There's someone who understands my pain. There's something about pain that wants understanding. It's relieved when someone says, yes, I know what you're feeling. You see, somehow our pain is lessened. Jealousy towards those who still have their loved ones. Anger towards those whom I consider to be the cause of my loved one's death. So that could be someone who was driving the car, could be the doctor or nurse that made a mistake, could be someone who was making him upset all the time until he had a heart attack. This is what we believe. I believe that no one is the cause of anyone else's death. But the common belief is that the doctor is to blame, the driver is to blame, the other person is to blame. Anger towards God, who has allowed this to happen, This is not unusual. Revenge towards those who are at fault. It's very common, especially in Crete and Mani. So there's the whole eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth perception. And pain of the loss of the physical presence of my loved one in my life. So you can see that these beliefs and that these unhappy, unpleasant emotions are very natural after the loss of a loved one. I would like to read to you now a list of positive thought forms. I mean, these are, you have a paper with all of these written, you don't have to write them. It's all written down. You have it, but you have it upstairs. Positive thought forms, which if we can believe them, will help us to cope more peacefully with the death of loved ones. 1. I am an eternal soul and have the power to live, to survive, to be happy, and to offer much to others. My loved one is an eternal, immortal soul who continues to live in another level of existence more beautiful than the one I now experience. So who's the lucky one? We say, I'm the lucky one who lives, or he's the lucky one who got out of his body. 3. Since my loved one is very well and far closer to his true nature and to God, I can be glad for him, and I can give joy to myself and to those around me. 4. God is within me and around me, and thus I always feel security, protection, and tranquility. That my relationship with the divine is the source of my security, not the being who just left his body. 5. Everything happens according to a perfect divine plan, which gives to each of us what he or she needs for our evolution as souls. So, for some reason, it was best for my loved one to move on to another level of existence. As for my own evolution towards God, it is best that I continue on here even without him or her. Everyone on this earth has lost loved ones, not only me. Also, we will all lose one by one all the people we know, because we are only temporary on this earth, and our or their departure is perfectly natural. This reminds me of a story about Buddha, in which this person who lost a loved one goes to Buddha and says, please bring my loved one back to life. Although I think Buddha was not known for doing miracles. And he says, okay, but first you will bring me a bowl of rice from a house which has not experienced the loss of a loved one in the last 5 years. And so this person went from house to house, and of course could not get a bowl of rice from any house in which someone had not lost a loved one. And so the meaning is, why are you so focused on yourself? Everyone has lost a loved one. It's not just you. The departure of the soul from the restrictions of their temporary physical body is a beautiful liberation from a very limited incarnated state. The loss of my loved one is a great opportunity for spiritual development through the cultivation of inner power, tranquility, security, and self-acceptance. I accept the perfection of the divine plan and forgive God and everyone for what is happening to me. My loved one would want me to be happy and to continue my life creatively and joyfully. This message is often given in dreams. Now, I think I mentioned to you that one main question I always ask to people who have lost loved ones recently is, has he come yet in a dream? Because this always happens. Now, what happens is that if the person is very attached, that they will block this dream because they're not ready for it. And then some cousin will have the dream or some friend. someone who knows the person but is not so emotionally involved. And they will communicate this dream. And the dream will always have to say, don't worry, I'm okay. I'm fine. Tell my mother I'm fine. Tell my wife I'm fine. Everything's okay. You see? This is the message which either comes directly or through another person. The soul is trying to get that message. Just go on with your life. Everything's okay. Now sometimes they may say, pray for me. I need help. Or light a candle for me. Because they may need help at that time. But usually it's, I'm fine. I am accepted by society for what I am, and not because of my relationship with someone. The loss of a loved one is not related to punishment, but is instead a great opportunity for spiritual development and inner growth. I am a pure child of God, and He loves me unconditionally. No one can be responsible for someone else's death. Each person or soul has selected the hour, the way, and the place from which he will leave. The others are simply instruments he is using for his departure. I can, even now, correct my relationship with my loved one with inner concentration, mental communication, and prayer. We are all evolving souls, all children of God. I open myself to my brothers in the family of humanity who are now with me on the planet. My loved one would want me to do so. It is, rather than focusing on what I have lost, focus on how many beautiful beings are around me now, and even more importantly, how many beings need help. So I am focusing on a soul who has left the physical plane when there are so many souls on the physical plane who need some kind of service. I share with others sorrow and joy. We are one big family of humanity. I find meaning in life by offering, creating, and evolving. This is why I have come to the earth. Life is a gift of God, and it is my duty to use it for my benefit and for the benefit of others. Today, 40,000 parents have lost their children. Tomorrow, another 40,000 parents will lose their children. And tomorrow, another 40,000. I am not alone in pain. The soul's departure from the physical body is a natural part of life on the earth. And the last one, there is only one universal life which expresses itself through all beings. The same consciousness that has expressed itself through my being, my loved one, is now being expressed to everyone around me. Loving and offering to others, I love and offer to him. That there is only one consciousness, one being in the universe. We separate a particular form of that one being and say, I love this being gives me joy, security, and meaning. But that is something that we do with our minds. The reality behind that being is the one universal being. I'd like to read to you a letter from Apollonius, an ancient Greek philosopher who is said to have traveled to India, to Governor Valerio concerning his son's death. It's a very beautiful letter. No one actually dies except apparently, just as no one is actually ever born, but only appears to. When a spiritual being projects itself into matter, we call this birth. And when it returns to a state of pure spirit, we call this death. The truth is that divine essence is never born and can never be destroyed. It is wrong to assume that someone does not exist because we cannot see him with our eyes or hear him with our ears. We believe that he no longer exists simply because we cannot perceive him anymore with our senses. What people do not understand is that even though a child comes into this world through his parents, he is not created by his parents. Only God exists, and he takes on the name and form of every person. This is a very Indian concept. I'm very surprised to hear this from a Greek philosopher. Only God exists, and he takes on the name and form of every person. Some people mourn when God leaves a form and returns to his original immortal essence, even though God simply changes position and not his nature. In actuality, we should not mourn death, but rather respect it. The best way to honor death is to leave your son in God's hands. It's his son who has died, okay? And continue to govern, just as before, the people you have been entrusted with. The best person to govern others is one that can govern himself. You must master your pain. What benefit or honor is there in crying about events which have been sent by God? If the divine will is to be found in the roots of this creation, that is, if everything in creation happens because God wills it, and it is, then the wise person will not doubt the will of the divine, but will accept that whatever happens is for the best. I was very surprised to find this letter in the ancient Greek teachings. So, in conclusion, what can we do if and when we lose a loved one, or how perhaps can we help someone who has lost a loved one? First of all, about helping others, you must know that anything you say won't make much difference for a few months anyway, unless they are already attuned to these spiritual truths. We have had some of our group facilitators lose loved ones in the last year. One lost her husband, another lost her child, and they were able to overcome it very well and very quickly. But because they have been here for 6, 7, 8 years, working on their spiritual faith, and they're able to confront the death of the husband and death of the child quite well. Other people who have not developed this faith, anything that you say will not be able to affect their emotional state for at least 2 or 3 months. But you can be there practically. Just a presence, a positive presence, helping them in any way, even practically. Cooking a meal, going to do an errand for them, just being with them, going for a walk in nature with them. Discussing or not discussing what has happened. Another aspect for us and for them is to be able to express our feelings openly. Holding on to pain and not crying and not expressing our pain is not useful. Secondly, it is very useful if we can pray for the departed one, because that makes us feel useful. It also removes the possibility that we will be attracting them again to the physical level, so that we pray for their safe departure, for the uniting with the light, with God, and don't pull them back and pull ourselves back by wanting to have contact with them. The worst thing that we can do is to go to a medium and ask the medium to contact them, to communicate with us. In 80% of the cases, the medium will be false. It won't be true. And the other 20%, it may be true, but we will be limiting the freedom of that soul to go on in its process. It's not indicated. Then I need to begin to free myself from this focus. Now this will happen gradually. One thing is to be able to begin reading books about what happens after death, reading books about spiritual life. Another factor will be to try to do something which has meaning for others, such as going to an orphanage, going to an old person's home, helping the blind, the poor. There is being of use, of service to other beings. It's a very important aspect. So either it's service or evolution, or eventually some form of creativity. Painting, writing, dancing, theater, a garden, anything that inspires us. Also, it'll be necessary to develop our faith, either through reading or through belonging to a group of people who meet once a week and discuss spiritual truths and pray together or meditate together. This will strengthen our faith, and if we have enough faith, we can overcome it much more quickly. It'll be very important to forgive ourselves for any mistakes, because guilt really extends the pain and deepens it. So we can forgive, we can ask forgiveness even though the being has left the physical body, ask forgiveness, and then just experience that forgiveness. And it's not important when we ask forgiveness to be forgiven. That's not the case. It's enough just to ask forgiveness. We are finished. Whether the other forgives or not is his own problem. We don't need the other's forgiveness. We need to have that quality of mind to ask forgiveness. And then lastly, we need patience. It takes time. But as I say, time heals. And with time, this pain gradually heals. It heals much more quickly if we can if we have faith in the spiritual truths. It heals more quickly if we become more occupied in life and more active, either creating or serving. We have to be careful here, however. Some people use activity as a form of denial, as an escapism. So we shouldn't be so active so that we can't feel. We want to be able to feel and release those feelings, but not just be in the feelings. So we want to get that balance of activity and space that we need to feel what's going on in our life, which will change. Gradually, we won't need so much more time for feeling. We can be more involved in life without that involvement being a form of escapism from what we're feeling. So those are some thoughts about how we can cope with the departure of our loved ones. And basically, we need to strengthen our belief in these positive thought forms. If we can believe these positive thought forms, which are listed here, we can overcome it much more quickly. Any questions that you have concerning coping with the departure of loved ones? Okay, I hope it doesn't happen to you anytime soon, but it is going to happen sometime, unless you leave first, unless you're the lucky ones and you leave first. So be prepared, think about it, and work on it. Okay. So we'll continue next week with the simulated death experience.